In this video, we will now continue with SOHCAHTOA, which means trigonometry involving right triangles, but we're going to be solving for missing sides. The first step is the same as before. You're going to mark your reference angle, but in this case, it's going to be an angle that you know. Always make sure, though, the reference angle is never the right angle. The reference angle is always one of the other two angles. So in this case, the 35 degrees is the reference angle. Second step is to label the side you know, which is 15, and the side you are trying to determine, which is the x, with either opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. So the 15 is opposite the right angle, so that's the hypotenuse. And the x is opposite the 35, so that's the opposite. And a reminder that if we know the opposite and the hypotenuse, then you're using the SO part of SOHCAHTOA, which means sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So based on the side you're trying to figure out and the side you know, O and H, that tells you that sine is the formula you're going to use. So we're going to write down that formula. Sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Now substitute. Line up your equal sign. Sine. Now the theta is the angle, which this time we know it's 35. So you're going to put 35 in for theta. The opposite was x, and the hypotenuse was 15. Now, when you solve this, you're going to be solving it differently than you did when we were solving for angles. You only use sine inverse, cos inverse, and tan inverse when you are solving for an angle. You don't do that when you're solving for a side. When you're solving for a side, what we're going to be doing is cross multiplying. So we're going to put this as over 1 so that we have two fractions. And you're going to cross multiply. So this bottom gets multiplied with this top. So 1 times x is x, and this bottom gets multiplied with this top. So that's going to be equal to 15 times sine 35. And that's what you're going to type into your calculator. 15 times sine 35. Make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. And you get that x is approximately, and when it's a side, you're going to round to 1 decimal place, 8.6. So round your answer to the desired value, which is typically sides are rounded to the nearest tenth, which is 1 decimal place. Now for a word problem, just want to remind you about angle of elevation and angle of depression. So angle of elevation is when the lower object looks up at the higher object. So the dog's angle of elevation is from the horizontal eye level line of sight and the angle it looks up to get the bird. The angle of depression would be the angle that the bird looks down at the dog. So it starts from the eye level, which is the horizontal line of sight, and it goes down to the line of sight towards the dog. And then, of course, remember that because of the Z pattern, the angle of elevation and the angle of depression are equal to each other. So in this example, when it's a word problem, you're going to start with drawing a diagram and labeling it. So from a point on the ground, so here's the ground, here's a point. The angle of elevation to the top of the tree, and the diagram does not have to be drawn to scale. There's the side. The angle of elevation to the top of a 25-foot tree, so the tree is 25 feet, is 32 degrees. So this is the angle of elevation. Angle of elevation goes from the horizontal line, which is the ground, and upwards. So that's the angle of elevation. And you're going to put a little right angle symbol there to show that it's a right triangle. And we're trying to find out how far the point is from the tree. So that's this length here. Now what we're going to do is mark our reference angle. So our reference angle is the angle of elevation of 32 degrees here. Now label the two sides, the side we know and the side we're trying to find out. So the side we know is opposite our reference angle, so that's the opposite side. The side we're trying to find out is the adjacent, because this side is opposite the right angle, so this is the hypotenuse, which means that this side is the adjacent. And then up here, to find out the formula, we know opposite and adjacent. So because we know opposite and adjacent, then we're going to use the tan formula. So TOA means tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. So the formula is going to be tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Substitute in. Tan, our theta is 32 degrees. Our opposite is 25, and our adjacent is x. Then to solve it, we're going to make this a fraction and cross multiply. So 1 times 25, line up your equal sign. So 1 times 25 is 25. And then x times tan 32. So that's x times tan 32. Now in this case, tan is not isolated. So what we have to do is to divide both sides by tan 32. So in order to get x, what we're going to be doing is just taking 25 and dividing it by tan 32. So in your calculator, it's literally just 25 divided by tan 32. So that means x is approximately equal to 40.0. So therefore, the point is approximately 40.0 feet from the tree.